Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the Core Women Podcast. Today's guest is Josselyne Herman-Saccio, who is a master coach in the art of being unmessable with no matter what life throws at you. She has spent over 30 years as an entrepreneur, author, coach, course leader, and curriculum designer of transformative programs. Her mission is to empower people to live the life of their dreams now versus someday and develop themselves to be unmessable with in the process. She is the author of several books and is currently working on her latest entitled The Art of Being Unmessable With. Welcome, Josselyne.
Hi, thanks for having me, Summer.
Absolutely, it is a pleasure. Before we jump into the professional aspects of your life, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
I would say transformative. And why I say that is because I began participating in transformative workshops when I was 11. And that's 46 years ago. So it's my whole life. So I've grown up and, sort of the language that I learned. My first language is transformation. Let's put it that way. I speak English as a second language. It's been the core steady in my life throughout those 46 years.
Oh, I love how that is infused in all that you do.
Yes.
Love the word transformative. You have had a lot of experiences during your life's journey. Can you share some of the reflection points and experiences that led you to create the concept of being unmessable with?
Definitely. When I was, little, earlier than 5, my dream was to be a singer. I would, sing in front of the mirror, in front of my stuffed animals, the dog, whoever I could get as a captive audience, right? And then when I turned about 5, I was sitting in a car, I remember this, with my dad, who is a painter, but he had sort of stopped painting. And, he had an advertising agency, so he was always doing something else. And I said to him, how come you stopped painting? And he said to me, well, you can't do your art as your career. And it was sort of like an aside for him because he wasn't doing his art as his career. And I decided in that moment, it's not like my dad was like killing my dream. It was more, I decided, okay, it's not possible to do your art as your career. So I better plan to be a lawyer or a business person or something that you can do as a career. So it sort of faded into the background. But then fast forward about 15 years later, I was sitting in a transformative workshop and it occurred to me that that might not be the truth. This decision I made and the infinite wisdom of 5, what if that was just a decision and not the truth? It seems absurd now because, of course, there are people who do their art as their career. There are millions of them, right? But I couldn't see that inside of that constraint, inside of that belief. So all of a sudden I started seeing, oh, but Madonna does her art and and Ella Fitzgerald did it. And, Bobby Short did it. And most people listening probably don't know who Bobby Short is, but in any case, it just, loosened its grip in terms of it being so true. So then I was in a transformative seminar that was like right after that. And the seminar leader said to me, well, what did you get out of doing the original seminar? And I shared that insight. And she said, well, is there anything you want to declare now? And I was like, no, I'm good. Because I knew if I said I'm a singer, that I'd have to do something about it. Right. And I was making money. I was running a production company. I was doing a career, not my art. And somehow, I don't know what she said or did, I can't remember, but somehow I said, I'm a singer. And it was like someone else was talking. But to me, saying I'm a singer was like saying I'm a loser. It was, to me, I still had it conflated with being a starving artist, which I did not want to be. And as I started exercising that muscle of introducing myself to people as a singer over the next few weeks, it got easier and easier, like a muscle, it just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And all of a sudden I started taking actions that a singer would have, like recording a demo and scheduling a show and telling people I'm a singer. And that's when within 3 months, I got a record deal. And that song of our record ended up going #1, knocked Whitney Houston out of the #1 spot with I Will Always Love You. We were the next #1. So it was like magic, right? And I said, okay, if I could do that just from one insight in a transformative seminar, just from like a 3-minute thing, then anybody can. And I'm going to make it my business to make sure that people get to live their dreams and not be stopped by those things that can be transformed. And that was pretty much where the whole birth of my being dedicated to people developing themselves to be unmessable with, because unmessable with doesn't mean tough. It means staying true to your vision and taking actions consistent with your dreams and vision versus getting stopped by reasons and considerations and justifications and fears and all the stuff that stops people, messes with people, as it were.
Right. I love that history, that reflection point, which brought you here today. Isn't it interesting how the conditioning of what we're told
Yes.
we believe, we take on as our belief system? As somebody in the clinical world who's worked in human services for years, who's done hundreds of assessments with human beings, it's funny how we take that on as our own beliefs. And it's hard to see beyond that because of those years and years of conditioning from parents, caretakers, clergy, teachers, you name it. I love that you're talking about your concept of being unmessable with, what that means, and how you take people through a process of coming into their own, or as we would call in the clinical world, individuation, how you start to individuate from the other.
Well, actually, I have a tiny bit of a tweak to what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't think it's conditioning from external, because it wasn't that my father said that to me. He said lots of things to me that I didn't listen to over the years. It's that I said it. So in the work that I do with people, it's never what happens or what other people say or do. It's what you say to yourself about what they say or do that messes with you. So for instance, which I'm sure you've dealt with this many times, if somebody suffers some sort of sexual abuse or any kind of abuse, right? It's not what happened. It's that they decided, I'm not good enough, I can't trust people. That's the prison they're in. It's not the prison of the incident or the saying of something from somebody. It's whatever they put themselves in as a declaration or a decision in that moment. So we become the jailers, the prisoners at the same time, and the jury, because we sentence ourselves to a life where you can't do your art as your career.
Yeah. I believe that from my
it gets
perspective,
reinforced.
it gets reinforced
yes,
because
totally.
I believe that we ourselves create the roadmap in our brain that we return to.
Yep.
There's introductions to these ideas by others. And so how we take those on looks very different for each one of us, depending on how we return to that messaging. And then once we create that messaging and we continue to return to it, what I call is brain mapping.
Yep.
So it's not the technical like brain map that you would get in radiology. It's my term in regards to that's what you're creating regarding the messaging and the roadmaps in your brain. If you continue to return to them.
Which is great because you can interrupt them and retrain your brain.
There
it's
you
malleable.
go.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly what Unmessable with is talking about.
Exactly. The rerouting to a different road.
There you go. Exactly. Which I absolutely love. I think it's hard sometimes for people to figure out their starting point in that. Where do I begin? Because they're so accustomed to returning to those maps. It's programs like yours, books like yours that are going to help people with the steps they need for their roadmap, how to do that interruption, or what I call a U-turn, to look back to see how far you've come to make the changes that you want to make in your life.
Yes.
I'd like to ask you another question. What does it mean to live the life of your dreams now, and how can someone start today?
Well, the first thing is people confuse goals with vision. So you might have a goal to double your business or win an Academy Award or whatever your goal is, right? But that's a someday goal. That's going to happen in 5 years or 2 years or whenever it is. That's different than the space from which that goal came. which is what I call vision. It's more like, well, if you accomplish that, then what would be present in your life? That's what you really want. You want that non-dual spatial experience of life. So if what you end up getting to after you ask a few, like, well, if that happened, then what? If that happened, then what? Usually people get to something in the realm of freedom, or, what would be available to me is self-expression or joy or something spatial, not tangible. That becomes the dream source that you can live now, because you don't have to wait till you win an Academy Award to experience freedom. You can create freedom right now in whatever conversation you're in, or at Starbucks, or I always say Starbucks, I shouldn't do that, or at Motto or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever you get your coffee. But really, it's a right now phenomenon. So vision is not a someday phenomenon, but most people have their dreams associated with goals versus the space that's available right now and right now and right now. You don't have to wait. And that's what I teach people. I teach people to see when they're in that world of being messable with, identify it, hack it, get to neutral, and then shift over to that space of vision, which is accessible and expressible at any moment.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. How can people shift from responding versus reacting to life challenges to creating their vision, even when they aren't sure what that vision is?
Yeah, that's the biggest issue for most people, is they don't know what their vision is. Even really highly successful people, it's all about getting stuff done. It's all about accomplishment, right? So it's more in the goal world. So, I just do a very simple kind of like, well, what are your goals then? And everybody has goals, so that they're not confused about. And then I just ask them, okay, well, if you accomplish that, then what would be available in your life as an experience? Not as a tangible, like, oh, I'd have $1 million, or I'd have, a vacation home or something like that. It's more like, okay, then what would that be like as a presence? And when we get to that space of presence, that's a good candidate for their vision. So we can begin there. It's all etched in sand. You're not stuck with anything, but that's a good starting place. I have a process on my website. It's called the Dream Source Discovery process. It's like a 5-day process where people can kind of go through that real quick to do a Cliff Note version to get to their vision, or dream source, as I call them interchangeably. Or I have a 6-week pre-recorded course where people can really delve into not only their vision, but what messes with them in fulfilling that vision. And I have a free workbook that'll give you sort of like the outline of the 12 steps to do it.
Great. And where's that free workbook?
The free workbook is on my website, beunmessablewith.com, but you can go straight to, actually, any page you go to, it'll pop up within 30 seconds. But if you go to the freebie page, which is giftfromjoss.com, you can get all sorts of free resources depending on what you want to up your unmessable with muscle with. Like some people, money messes with them the most, or burnout, or, maybe peace. I have stuff for all of that. I got an app for that. I've got a download for that. I got a video for that.
And
my podcast is a great resource too, Be Unmessable With, because I have little short episodes every week that kind of give turbo tips. And then I have guest episodes where we delve into the tools more deeply.
Oh, fantastic. I love what you said about nothing is etched in sand. Nothing remains there. Nothing has to stay there. And it reminded me, and it gave me a visual of one of those Etch-a-Sketches. Remember when you were a kid, and you could change it. And like, I wasn't very good at those knobs, but that's my own issue. But
yes, I know. Well, those knobs were not very user friendly. I have to agree with you on that.
Right?
One. Yes.
If it was a joystick, it might be a little easier.
A little bit, or a mouse or something.
Right. So I thought, what a visual. It doesn't have to remain static. It doesn't have to remain there. Things are ever changing. Our skin sloughs off. Like, things change every day. The weather changes. Why can't we change? Right?
Yeah, we can. But
absolutely.
The Etch-a-Sketch is a perfect visual, because in order to create a new picture, you've got to get to nothing. You have to get to nothing. And that's the work that I do with people, is how do you get to nothing when you have so much crap in the space? Decisions, beliefs, shouldn'ts, rights, wrongs, all that stuff comes from the world of reaction or survival, or the world of being messable with, as I would call it. So how do you get from there to nothing, which is the neutral point, which doesn't last because the universe doesn't tolerate empty space? So something's going to fill that space. So how do you get to nothing and then not go right back down into that world? Actually go to a different space, that world of vision and creation. So it's the shifting from the world of reaction to nothing to the world of creation. That's sort of the pathway.
Yes. And I really like that distinction. I talk about this all the time, switching that from reaction to response. But I like that ad going from reaction to neutral, then to creation,
Yeah.
which I would also call the response, because
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking about now, but also what is the bigger picture? So you're not reacting, you're responding in
Yeah.
regards to those steps to get there, right?
Yeah. Creating your response versus just being on autopilot.
Absolutely. And part of this too is when people are in that reactionary place,
Yeah.
that can be a sense of overwhelm or a feeling of overwhelm for many people. So this is a very common. And then it creates somewhat of a fog for people, or they
Totally.
can't get out from under it. What practical steps do you recommend for overcoming some of this overwhelm?
Well, overwhelm, what I've discovered over the last 30 years of working with people is overwhelm is directly related to being disconnected from your vision. So all roads lead to vision with me, because if you're disconnected from the vision, then you're just in down and in kind of mode. You're getting stuff done. You're reacting to whatever's coming at you. You're surviving, even at high levels. You could be a very highly successful person because you're really good at reacting to things, right? So if you look at vision as context versus content, then you can see that in the context of building freedom, doing your work items occurs differently than in the context of survival and getting through the week. So context is more in language, and it's not something you can point to in reality. I don't know if everybody's listening or watching this, but I'll explain what you're seeing. I'm holding up my pointer finger, and in the context number, this is a 1, but in the context body part, it's a finger. And in the context direction, it's up. So the very same content can show up differently to us, and it gives us a different experience of life. So overwhelm is when you're in a context that is not your vision. It's more of getting stuff done, getting through things, making something happen, being driven to produce a result. That's all where overwhelm and burnout happens. When you're connected to your vision, and the vision is the context for what you're doing, then the experience of life is very different. And I mean, I have to say, I literally cannot remember a time when I've been overwhelmed, ever. Now, I have had these tools for 46 years, so it's not totally mysterious, and it's not easy, but it's simple. It is all about the context, because the context is decisive. If I think my mother is annoying, if that's the context I have for my mother, and she tells me, "Did you wear a sweater today?" That's going to be more annoying, right? But if my context for my mother is she's the greatest thing in the whole world, I love her so much, and she says, "Did you wear a sweater?" It'll occur for me like she loves me and she cares about me. Very different response in one world versus the other.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people start from the first response
The
and not
automatic,
the
yes, the default.
automatic,
Yeah.
right? The default. It's kind of like if you're right-handed, I'd be sitting in an assessment with a person, and I said, it's like using your right hand if you're right-handed. It's natural, it's organic, that's your default. So it's going to take a little bit of work
Yes,
to undo that and use maybe your left hand
totally.
and to learn how to use that. And then that will become easier if you start using it more often to create it as a habit.
Exactly. It's just like any muscle, though. It's like if you have an atrophied muscle and then you have an overcompensating muscle, at some point you got to stop using the overcompensating muscle and start building that atrophied muscle through a series of activities or practices like habits, creating them as habits. So it takes discipline. It's not like a magic pill. I wish it were. But what I've found is it takes practice and it takes discipline, and it's doable.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else I'd like to add on here, when you said disconnected from your vision, I think a lot of times people are maybe disconnected from that vision because they don't know their own value or their values, which are two distinctly different things.
Yeah.
Like, say, for instance, I'll take my business. I specifically looked at my values to see what would stream through everything that I do,
Yes.
because then it doesn't become disconnected. I'm really connected with it. Not only am I passionate about it, but these are the things that I live
Yes, definitely.
and feel very strongly about them, in that I want this to flow through everything that I do because it's meaningful and purposeful for me.
Yeah.
And I have an intention with it. So everything that you're saying here is so incredibly wonderful in regards to it'll be supportive for others that read it, that take it on, that can learn your process. So thank you for offering so much here in regards to the resources, the resource of the art of being unmessable with. When does that book come out, and tell us a little bit more?
I'm still writing it. So that'll be, maybe I'll come back once it's out and we can make it available to people. But right now, just take the free workbook and start doing the steps. That would be what I would say to people is download that free workbook, The Basics of Being Unmessable With. It'll give you a place to start in terms of practicing the methodology to shift from reaction to creation, because you don't have to live a life by default. You really can design your life, and it is a very different experience in life. There's almost nothing that I come up with as a goal that I can't fulfill on with this technology.
Fantastic. Well, as we come to the close of the interview, my last question for you is, can you give one tip from your upcoming book, although you're still writing it, The Art of Being Unmessable With, that people can apply right away?
Definitely. So in your calendar, my calendar is like my masterpiece. This is my life, right? It's like an empty canvas until I put things there. And in your calendar, whatever you have to do in your calendar, add a piece called What Are You Creating? So this is where you add the context to what you're doing. If you have go to the gym, put before it creating vitality, go to the gym. If you have a podcast interview you're going to do, create impact, podcast interview. So whatever it is you're creating with what you're doing, add it to your actual calendar so that throughout the day you're connected to your vision.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that tip. And thank you, Josselyne, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. You can follow Josselyne Herman-Saccio at Be Unmessable With on IG, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also follow Josselyne Herman-Saccio on LinkedIn and at beunmessablewith.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.